Did you know the animal types in Zootopia were picked for a very specific reason? Or sometimes old-school Disney animators would get tired of drawing the same thing over and over? Or do you know why Phineas's head is actually a triangle? On this channel, we've been covering all sorts of weird, useless, and obscure behind-the-scenes facts about animated movies and TV shows. And today, we'll go over some of the best stories of the year. So sit back and relax as I give you the ultimate lowdown on the behind-the-scenes stories that will make you see iconic scenes and characters in a whole new way, because I've tracked down the animators who actually worked on these projects, and I found out some pretty incredible details. I can't watch Toy Story the same way, because do you notice how when the characters walk on the bed, it leaves a little indent? Well, that specific detail had to be animated by hand by an animator named Glenn McQueen. This guy also basically saved Pixar by being the fastest animator like ever. Since Toy Story was the first CGI movie, no one knew exactly how to do it. The computers were constantly crashing and slowing them down, which caused a lot of problems. And what was worse is Disney refused to give them more time to finish the movie. But luckily, McQueen was Pixar's secret weapon. While everyone else was struggling to animate 2 seconds a week, he'd do 20. He ended up animating 7 whole minutes of the movie all by himself, which is absolutely insane. He was so fast, he even had time to go in and add those little details like the dents on the bed when the characters walk. Without him, the movie would not have been finished on time, so to honor him after he tragically passed away, they named Lightning McQueen after him. Apparently, no one noticed this in Zootopia 2, but Disney's animation team chose certain animals to be in the movie for very specific reasons. And it's low-key genius, because at this point we all know that every little thing in an animated movie has a purpose. Locations, props, and even colors of t-shirts all have meanings. For Zootopia 2, the animators could have picked any animals to be in the movie. To narrow it down, they decided to only choose animals that would help support the story. If you haven't seen it yet, the movie is about mammals versus reptiles, so they chose a pit viper, who should be scary, but made him nice, and purposely chose to make him the color blue because blue doesn't exist in the mammal world, so it would make him stand out. It seems random, but this beaver character was picked because A, it's a woodland creature like a rabbit, but it's also the only mammal that has scales, like a reptile, so she's a little bit familiar and a little bit unknown. And of course, they chose lynxes as villains because they're sneaky predators who thrive in cold environments, unlike reptiles, and they're more feline, to contrast with Nick's canine. And lastly, in the wild, their main prey is rabbits. So check this out. In Spider-Verse, there's a 2-second shot of people playing basketball, but it actually has the single best detail in the movie because it perfectly explains why this animation is so loved. So the animator who worked on this actually has a family member in a wheelchair, so they went out of their way to add authentic little details like harnesses on the chairs, spare wheels on the sides, and even alter the rig to make different kinds of amputees. All that extra work was just for a 2-second shot, but it really adds to the overall personal feel of the movie. And basically every scene in the movie has some sort of personal touch like that. This guy based the colors on this scene after his first date with his wife, and this guy's cat sadly passed away during production. So if you look in the background for the name Plomps, that's the cat's name. You've seen Paranorman, but now the movie's even better on the rewatch because the animators explained the hardest things to animate were characters and crowds that weren't moving. For scenes like this, they developed a special technique to make sure the people in the background move just enough to feel alive but not distracting. Also, you might have noticed that everything in the movie looks a little bit off. Windows aren't centered, eyes aren't even, and even legs have different lengths. This made animating even the simplest walk way more challenging for the animators. But the hardest thing to animate is also the most unexpected: Norman's eyes. Norman's an outsider, and he can also see ghosts, so they wanted to make him a little different. And you might notice that his eyes aren't exactly perfect circles. But this actually made it really hard, so the animators had to pay extra attention to his eyes while they were animating. Speaking of hard things to animate in stop motion, this guy spent months animating one Wallace and Gromit scene. No one would expect this quick 6-second moment was secretly the most complicated shot in the entire movie. It's unbelievable. It turns out animating the iconic Feathers McGraw is a challenge, because he's so simple that if you don't animate him correctly, he can look dead. So even though there are tons of scenes that are more visually complex, it turns out the hardest scene was the most simple. Do you remember the scene in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs where he goes on a snowball rampage? It's hilarious, but I never see it the same way after hearing the story of the animator who worked on it. So this movie is known for its super cartoony animation style, which looks great on screen, but kind of created a huge problem for one animator. This guy is a master who has worked on hit after hit after hit, but as a young animator, he was eager to prove himself. So when he got a chance to animate a full 10-second scene, he knew he had to go big. His first attempt at this scene featured fluid animation that felt epic and real. He worked on it so hard and was really proud of his work, but when he showed it to the directors, their reaction was unexpected. They made him throw it all away and start completely over. They said the animation was great, but it actually looked too good, and basically wanted him to make it look more stupid. And as a result, we get this really funny Muppet-style animation. I love Aladdin even more after finding out the meaning behind Jasmine's dress. So in the movie, the genie absolutely stole the show, so people forget that while he was being animated, another team of animators was working on Jasmine, and they put just as much work into her character. We just never really noticed. You see, there is so much symbolism behind her character that it took me like 30 years to figure out, especially during the scene where her dad is trying to force her to live a life she doesn't want to live. There are two things going on. One, she feels trapped, so not only did they animate birds in a cage, but they made her bedroom shaped like a cage as well. And this is great because Aladdin also feels trapped in his poverty and street rat image, so it really ties them together. The second detail is a little bit more subtle. So notice how she's sitting by a fountain, and they even went out of their way to animate the water. And then later in the movie, we see her around water again. Even her dress is blue, like water, which all makes sense because just like water, for Aladdin, Jasmine is the most precious thing in the desert. Details like this is why old Disney movies just hit differently. Speaking of hits, I see this moment from Princess and the Frog in a whole new way too. It's a small detail, but the animator who worked on this scene said Disney didn't love how he had Dr. Facilier hit Lawrence. In Disney movies back then, showing any kind of hitting wasn't really encouraged. But this action wasn't violent. It was supposed to be more like a slap you upside your head kind of smack. Later in the movie, when Dr. Facilier kills Ray, he also had a darker take on that scene, but Disney actually made him reanimated. You never know what's going on behind the scenes of your favorite Disney movie. This animator, Kathy Zielinski, actually explained how her and her team got really tired of animating a very specific part of a character. So back when they were working on Hunchback, she was responsible for animating the villain Frollo, and she worked really hard to make this guy the creepiest Disney villain like ever. But while animating him, they ran into an unexpected problem. When she was designing his costume, she gave him this big hat, thinking it looked cool, but underestimated just how hard that thing was to animate. By the end of the movie, all the animators were tired of drawing that stupid hat, so they had a pretty funny solution. In one scene, they had him throw his hat and then just never wear it again for the rest of the movie. Apparently, no one noticed this about King of the Hill. The show is so iconic, but a fan noticed a tiny animation detail that blew up on Reddit, and I can't stop thinking about it. So next time you watch King of the Hill, pay close attention to the animation, because the animation team had a secret rulebook that explained all the little details that help ensure the characters behaved realistically. So no matter if the characters were running, eating, or playing with their friends' fake butts, they acted like real people, not cartoons. But a fan on Reddit discovered the animators were even more dedicated than anyone even realized. It turns out in one episode, every trick this magician makes is animated with shockingly specific attention to detail. His cards can be seen under his clothes before he does his trick. He loops the hoop around twice because he's using one of these thingies. They even actually animated his assistants leading the person off stage without the audience noticing. Did you know one lady single-handedly saved Lilo and Stitch from being an absolute disaster? This story is legendary. Before it was even made, Lilo and Stitch was unlike any other Disney movie. You see, back in the day, Disney animators would base each new movie off a new art style. But with Lilo and Stitch, they wanted to do something different because Disney refused to make the movie if it wasn't in the art style of the director, Chris Sanders. But the thing was, he couldn't figure out how to teach other animators to draw like him. It was bad, but Disney called in their secret weapon. This is Sue Nichols, a Disney artist who did the impossible, because she dove in and studied the art style for weeks and created this guide that explained to the animators how to draw in the style of Chris Sanders. She's an absolute legend, but sadly passed away a couple years ago. If you watch any Dreamworks movie, you're gonna notice the logo. It's the boy on the moon, and it's iconic. But the story behind this logo makes it even more awesome. It turns out behind the scenes, creating this character was complicated because he wasn't supposed to exist. So when this guy drew the original logo, he only had a few hours to complete it. He quickly hand-painted the moon and the clouds, and at the last minute, decided to doodle his son on the moon. And the next day, when he showed it to Steven Spielberg and his team, everyone loved it. I never knew the lore behind this logo, but it's so awesome to hear. So obviously, one of my favorite things about animation is how every single detail has a deeper meaning, even when you don't realize it. You see, for Wild Robot, Dreamworks invented new technology which gave the movie this handmade look. Literally everything on screen was hand-painted instead of regular CGI. Everything but the main character. Next time you watch the movie, pay attention to the scenes at the beginning and at the end, very closely. Apparently, at the start, she's actually made of regular CGI, but as the movie progresses and she slowly adapts to the island, her model gradually changes, and by the end of it, she's a completely hand-painted model, which is something I never noticed. There are so many little animation details that don't really make sense until an animator explains them. If you're anything like me, you always wondered why The Simpsons were yellow. And the director, David Silverman, explained that it's because when they were designed, they had no hairlines, and yellow was a color that worked for both hair and skin. I also always wondered what Piglet was wearing. And his lead animator, Bruce Smith, said he's actually wearing a onesie. And finally, I always wondered why Phineas's head is a triangle. It turns out the initial sketch for Phineas started out on a restaurant napkin. There's a character with a triangle head. It took forever for for any studio to buy the idea. But as they were developing the show with Disney, the Disney executives actually wanted to change the character design, but the creators of the show refused. They wanted to make something that looks absolutely different than anything else on Disney Channel or TV in general.